We are here to learn the Mishnah in honor of Ezriel ben David, the late Eric Samson. We are continuing the series of studying a Mishnah in his memory, and we are learning chapter 1, Mishnah 16. To help us understand the Mishnah, we're going to go a little bit through some historical background to understand what is taking place and to understand the reasoning why our author of our Mishnah said what he said. In general, for several generations prior to the author of our Mishnah, which we're dealing with right now, Rabbi Gamliel, who lived about 40 years before the destruction of the Second Temple, for several generations prior, we had the Jewish leaders were made up of pairs. One was the head of the Beth Din, the Av Bezdin, and the other one was known as the Nasi, the prince. However, now beginning with Rabbi Gamliel and going to carry on for several generations after him, this now is going to be combined into one position, and therefore is given this name of Rabban, which is a combination of Rebbe, the rabbi, and the Nasi, and therefore Rabban, the combination of the two words, and therefore he was in charge of the judicial system as well as being the official head of the Jewish people. He came from the house of David, from the Davidic dynasty, and it continued in his bloodline for several generations from this point. Now, what was taking place during this time period was the previous leaders of the Jewish people, again, going back with the idea of having peers. We had the great sage Hillel as well as the great sage Shammai. Now, they were very different in the way they approach a lot of the Torah and their understanding. Hillel was much more on the kinder, nicer side, where Shammai usually took a much more stricter, harsher view on how one was to adhere to Torah law. Upon their passing, we formulated two general schools of thought, and there were actually two academies. One was known as Beit Shammai, the other as Beit Hillel, which was the Academy of Shammai and the Academy of Hillel, and you had your respective line of thinking, or depending on which academy you studied in or attributed your allegiance to, was how one went about in their conduct of Jewish law. Now, if you didn't strictly were the very knowledgeable, learned individual who belonged to the respective academy, and you were an average, typical Jew, many questions began, right? Which academy am I supposed to follow? What is the law like? Do we follow according to Hillel? Do we follow the law according to Shammai? What does one do? And therefore became a huge discord and huge confusion amongst the Jewish people. How do we go about it? And therefore, based on this understanding, we can now dive in directly now to the Mishnah. It is a very brief Mishnah, and therefore we'll go through it very quickly. So Rabbi Gamliel Haya Omer, Rabbi Gamliel, the author of our Mishnah, who says, Aseh l'charav, make for yourself a teacher, v'stalik min asafek, and free yourself of doubt, v'al tarbe la'aseh umades, and do not tithe by guesswork, even giving in excess of the required amount. That is a simple meaning, the simple definition of the Mishnah. But to really understand more of what he's saying, to put it in a more proper context, is to rather learn the Mishnah as follows. Rabbi Gamliel would often say, Aseh l'charav, appoint for yourself a teacher. Meaning, if you don't already have one, it is your obligation to go out and find one. Appoint for yourself. Why? In order that v'stalik min asafek, that you will remove yourself from any uncertainty. Uncertainty in what areas? We're not talking about a person that just doesn't know what's going on. We're talking about questions and doubts that people have in their Torah learning, in their observance of mitzvahs, in their Jewish conduct. And therefore, in order to avoid doubts in these areas, you need to have yourself a rabbi, one that you turn to, one that can lead you and guide you and set you on the right path. Because you cannot jump around from one rabbi to the next. You need to have, and it's preferable to have your rabbi. If we were to give an analogy to this, think of it as a doctor, right? You can perhaps go to various different specialists. You may decide to look up on your own, via the internet, do different research, hearing from various different specialists, whatever it may be. But when you really want to have a good handle on your own medical situation, you usually have your doctor. Right? Here in America, it's known as your GP, right? Your general practitioner. That's a doctor that you know knows you, he knows your history, you have a good rapport with him. And yes, he may take various different information perhaps other specialists, but can look at you in the totality, understanding you, whether to guide you, and so on, what is the best course of action for you. And the same idea comes with it with Judaism. There are many wonderful rabbis, and one should afford themselves every opportunity they have to be able to study from different rabbis, right? Especially today with the advent of Zoom, classes taking place around the world. Study from all different sorts of rabbis. But when it's coming to a direction you should take, which custom should you follow? What is the path that you should be going on? That you should have your rabbi, because that way your rabbi knows you. He knows your history. He knows your family situation and all the other issues that may be going on with you, and is there and the properly one that can guide you for your path to lead you on a good, just way for you, for your Judaism and your relationship with Hashem. Now, of course, you can ask the question, what do I need a rabbi for? Back in the day, you needed your town rabbi, right? You were limited to that. Today, with the advent of the internet, right, I have access to so many rabbis and so much information out there on the internet. I could do my own research, my own understanding. And so if I have to give another analogy to help understand it a little bit better, let's take, for example, cooking. There are some quite very popular shows that deal with various different cooking things. And one of them, which comes to mind, is the show called Chabad. And in this particular show, you have where chefs are given secret ingredients. They do not know what it is, 4 different ingredients, and they have to make from these ingredients a dish. Now, usually these items don't really mesh together very well one with another. So therefore, they are allowed to bring in other ingredients from the pantry, but their purpose is to be able to formulate and make a cohesive dish out of these ingredients. Now, in general, when it comes to cooking, cooking is all about mixing various different ingredients together to make a dish. So why not just take those 4 ingredients, mix them together, and hope for the best? Because it's quite obvious, right? You need to have some culinary expertise and understanding of which foods work better with others, to understand which other ingredients to bring in from the pantry in order to have a sound dish, a tasty dish, things which make sense. Now, they would not be able to do that because I know, if I ever watched that show, I always wonder I would have no idea what to do, how to deal with those respective ingredients. But rather somebody who's much more knowledgeable, because he studied, he learned, he knows, he works in specifically the culinary industry. He has a better handle on what tastes work together, which other things to bring in, and thereby being able to formulate and put together a much better dish. And so too comes when it comes to our Judaism, where, yes, we may know a lot of different information. We may have studied a lot. However, we need someone that is much more knowledgeable. The rabbi who has studied for years is more understanding, again, to use his area of expertise to help formulate and put together a good and proper path for an individual. The following last words of the Mishna go on to another topic, and why do you need the rabbi? And he says another statement, do not give meiser by guessing. Now, meaning how much meiser? Meiser is the concept of tithing. During the temple times when most Jewish people were farmers, you were obligated to give 10% tithing. We still have that concept today when it comes to tzedakah. One should give 10% of their earnings to tzedakah, to charity. But back in the temple time, it was specifically talking about whether it was 10% of your animals, whether it was 10% of your produce from your field. Now, a person can say, listen, why do I have to be so exacting in my calculations? I can guesstimate, right? Take an overall look, and that looks more or less like 10%. And you know what? And you're concerned, I'm not giving enough. I'll even give a little bit more, right? Big deal. I'm covered. And Rabbi Gamliel warns us and says, no, not even if you're going to give excess, right? Rather be exact in your calculations and give the right amount. Now, there are various different reasons that are given for why he's being so particular. But one obvious understanding is because, yes, perhaps you will give a little bit more. And there are some technical issues that can come about that we won't get into that now. But if you only work out your tithing by guesstimate, perhaps now you will overgiven, but very easily you can come to undergive. And if you undergive, therefore you haven't tithed your produce. And if you haven't tithed your produce, then all of your produce in times of the temple was forbidden. So therefore, rather giving an exacting amount to know exactly what it is that God is asking from you, God is not asking you to give an excess. However, if you undergive, you also lead to many other complications and issues. This is the understanding of the Mishnah. This is this teaching which Rabbi Gamliel was known for in this particular Mishnah. However, Rabbi Gamliel was actually known for several other things, and I'd like to share that with you to help understand the character and the author of our Mishnah. Now, Rabbi Gamliel, again, as we mentioned earlier, lived during the era of the end of the Second Temple, which again, Israel was under Roman dominion, and therefore the Jewish people were going through a very different new phase in their life. Most generations prior, when the Jewish people lived in peace and harmony in the land of Israel, they pretty much just lived amongst the Jewish people. The land of Israel was under Jewish rule. The law of the land was the Jewish law, and the inhabitants were Jewish people. Suddenly now, being under Roman dominion, you had a lot of Romans, a lot of Gentiles living in the land of Israel. The power of the land of Israel is now under Roman rule. And therefore, right, not to get into trouble and so on and so forth, we had a lot of interactions suddenly with our Gentile neighbors. And therefore, Rabbi Gamliel instituted many new laws within Judaism on the idea how one is to interact with a Gentile. He put onto the books that one should greet a Gentile. We have an obligation to also worry about the poor people of Gentiles. We have the obligation to worry about the sick people of Gentiles. We have the obligation to worry about the burial needs of Gentiles. And actually, that idea of burial is another very famous thing that Rabbi Gamliel was noted for. Is that today's day and age, you may not be aware, but it was only until Rabbi Gamliel's time, is when every Jewish individual is buried, every Jew is buried the same. The burial shrouds, which one is buried in, no matter where they are in the world, according to Jewish tradition, are today all the same. Irrespective of the stature or the financial needs of any individual, everybody is buried in the same way to show equality amongst the Jewish people and not to make a poor individual feel less of an individual and to diminish on their dignity that they didn't have the money. And therefore, the way it was actually instituted was upon Rabbi Gamliel's passing. He ordered and instructed that he be buried in simple burial shrouds, and so it became the official new custom of the Jewish people to take place this way. But when we think about these other teachings of Rabbi Gamliel, of telling us how to greet and deal with other people, I'd like to share with you a story to show you even the importance of following in that character trait, how we should be interacting with the world. There was a story told that several years ago, there was a factory, a food industry factory, where there was a Jewish individual who worked there, and he was known as the rabbi of the factory. Now, he actually wasn't the rabbi. However, he was a Jewish individual. He sported the beard and the kippah and the whole look. And this is where he worked. But however, I guess amongst the Gentiles who worked there, because of the way he looked and he behaved, that he was given that the honorary title of the rabbi of the company. Well, one day, at the time of closing, after several hundreds of people that work in this factory, the manager was getting ready to leave and asking the guard at the front, right, are we good to go? Is everybody out that I can lock everything up? And the guard tells the manager, no, there's definitely not everybody has left yet today. And the manager saying, are you sure? Listen, when I walked through now to the exit, I didn't notice anybody around. I'm the last one out usually, right? And I didn't see anybody. Why are you so sure that not everyone left? He said, I'm telling you, not everyone is gone. So the manager says, okay, fine. Let me go take a look. He goes throughout the entire premises again, double checking, right? Offices are closed, lights are off. He does not see anybody there. And he goes back again to the guard saying, I do not see anybody. I believe everyone's gone for the night. I'd like to lock up and we can go home. And the guard tells him, no, I'm telling you, not everybody's gone. Someone is still for sure here. So the manager, he did not even want to argue, but really, quite convinced that he himself making a look through. He says, okay, fine. And the guard is insisting, I'm telling you, somebody's here. As a result of the guard's insistence, they do a much more thorough check around the premises of the factory. And they come to discover that one of the large freezers, which were on the premises, they found this individual, the rabbi of the factory, was actually locked inside the freezer. He was already almost unconscious, freezing, and surely had he stayed in the night, it would have led to his untimely demise. And thank God, because they found him, they took him out of the freezer, and they got him the help that he required. After this whole scene was over, the manager went back to the guard and said, how did you know that he was locked here? I looked around everywhere. I didn't see anybody. How did you know that he was here? To which the guard explained to him, he said, that of all the hundreds of people that work here every single day, most people do not give me any attention when they come or go from work. However, this individual, every single morning, he greets me with a warm good morning, and every evening upon closing time, he always greets me with a good, have a wonderful night. And I knew I got my good morning this morning. However, I did not get my usual greeting upon closing. And therefore, I was sure that he must still be here, because never does he miss that opportunity. Every single day at work, I get the greeting, both coming and going. And therefore, we see this beautiful trait that one never knows, just by being kind to other individuals, how it can even come to save one's life. I think this Mishna and this teaching, which we learned today, which again we learned in memory of Israel ben David, late Eric Samson, epitomizes so much of Eric's character and the teachings of Rabbi Gamliel. Firstly, the last part of the Mishnah, we're talking about being exact in your calculations. That very much was a character trait of Eric. The family shared it to me on multiple times, and when it came to different accounting issues in the company, right, he said he was so exacting, and he was able to pinpoint an error, which many times other people may have just brushed over because it was close enough. Eric was so concerned that that is not the exact number. Another wonderful, amazing feature of Eric, and again, things which not only we're learning for his merit, but things again to emulate, to continue his legacy, is how Eric treated other individuals. Countless stories have been shared of how no matter who you were, if you worked for Eric and in the company, in the factory, whatever it was, no matter who you were, Eric treated everybody with dignity, with respect, irrespective of the position that one held. And last but not least, the first initial part of the Mishnah, where we are told to appoint for yourself a rabbi. And again, the reason for that was to someone to guide you, to help, to aid you, to make you more successful, because we all go through life having questions, having doubts. We don't know the right way to proceed. We all need some sense of guidance. And Eric is someone who afforded his knowledge, his expertise to countless, countless people, even outside his area of work, which he was known as, in so many different places, to be able to listen to a person and give his guidance to help set another person on the right path, to guide them and to make the right decisions for whatever particular area that individual was working on. So in this great merit of the study that we do, in the merit of Israel ben David, it should bring about upon his neshama, an aliyah, and bring comfort to the rest of his family, for all the Torah learning taking place around the world in his merit. And surely it'll continue to bring blessings to the entire family, to await the coming of Mashiach. Everybody can be united back in Israel with our loved ones, and may it happen speedily in our days. Amen.